Chapter 19. Zoom Zip. This sort of thing will never get old. Watch this. We start out hovering 1 foot above Kenneth Ball's battered green notepad at the City Hall. Then we gently zoom out. Now we're 12 feet above the notepad. The whole press room below us is visible. The top of Kenneth's head, the handful of people in the crowd, even Mayor Moon as he hobbles off the stage. Zoom out again. 300 feet above the notepad. We're outside City Hall now, looking down onto its green slate roof. Peer through the walls, and the city workers become visible in every office, scurrying like bees in a hive. Zoom out. 1,000 feet above the notepad. Now we can see the entirety of the central square and several surrounding blocks. Tiny cars crawl down city streets, headed to destinations unknown. Zoom out. 5,000 feet now. From here, all of the Broadacre municipal area is visible, including the roof of Broadview Manor, along with some of the surrounding countryside. Cornfields look like checkerboard squares. The Salamone River divides the old city in the south from the North Broadacre development. Zoom out. 20,000 feet. At this distance, the whole region is visible. Streets look like hairlines etched into the land. A couple of other towns can be seen, Friendly, Daleville, and Willis. Everything else is farmland. Zoom out. At 250,000 feet, all of Indiana can be seen, though without the arbitrary political and legal boundaries, you can't really tell where one state ends and another begins. Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, and Kentucky merge with the Hoosier State into a single green landmass. Zoom out. We pass through a layer of clouds. Now we're looking down onto the entire United States from an altitude of 3 million feet. Both the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans can be seen. Green farmland, brown mountains, blue water. Only these general features can be discerned now. Zoom out. 50 million feet, and the Earth looks like a blue and white ball against a backdrop of brilliant stars. The atmosphere is non-existent up here, but that's okay. We don't need it. Zoom out. 250 million feet away now. The Earth is a marble, and we pass its nearest heavenly neighbor, the barren and stoic moon. An American flag waits there, motionless for all time. Zoom out. Now the orbits of neighboring planets in the solar system could be seen, if they were visible, like in school textbook drawings. We're 50 billion feet away, and we see Mercury and Venus. Zoom out. 300 billion feet from that notebook in Kenneth Ball's hand, the sun appears, and the entirety of the inner solar system. We pass Mars. The light from our star is blinding. Well, it would be if we had physical eyes. Zoom out. At 5 trillion feet, we can view our entire solar system. Our own neighborhood. The outer planets come into view. Jupiter, the gas giant. Saturn with its rings. Uranus, Neptune, and tiny Pluto. Zoom out. 30 trillion feet. The solar system recedes in a disquieting fashion, like the view a bearded castaway on his homemade raft might behold, as his desert island home drifts away, not knowing where he might land again, or even if there's anything else out there in the beyond. Zoom out. 500 trillion feet. Now the solar system is only a bright speck, a single star among countless others. And it's cold. So cold. 10 quadrillion feet. It's all stars again. We're in the space between. Zoom out. Figuring these distances in feet is becoming tiresome. Rote calculation is just so boring. So let's switch to measuring the distances in light years. At 5 light years, we pass the binary stars, Alpha Centauri A and B, as well as their associated planets. It's good to see planets again. It's a relief to see anything out here other than an endless star field. Zoom out. 250 light years. We pass more stars and the misty clouds of gas that make up our galaxy. The bright specks in the star field are beginning to converge, and constellations visible from Earth no longer seem at all familiar. Zoom out. Now at 30,000 light years, we can see the full spiral disk of the Milky Way galaxy. Zoom out. 5 million light years. Our own Milky Way galaxy is just a bright spot. The star field is gone. Only a handful of other galaxies provide points for reference. Zoom out. 80 million light years. We're in darkness. The sense of solitude is overwhelming at first, but of course, you get used to it. Here there are no distractions. Out here, you can just think and reflect. There's no sensory input of any kind. Just drift. It can be quite enjoyable for long spans of time, but we need to see something else. Zip all the way back into the press room of the City Hall in Broadacre, Indiana, on the planet Earth of the Milky Way galaxy. Zip! It's a little disorienting, isn't it? Now we're going to go the other way. The shiny bald spot on the back of Kenneth Ball's head looks promising, so let's start 1 foot above that. Zoom in. At a distance of 4 inches, we can see that Mr. Ball isn't entirely bald on top. He still has a few wispy bits of hair clinging tenaciously to his scalp. Zoom in. Now we're a ½ inch away. The tiny crinkles in Kenneth's skin look like the bottom of a dried-up lake. Zoom in. At 1/10 of an inch, we zip into one of those skin creases and fly past the outermost layer of dead skin. Zoom in. Let's switch to metric units. The English system of measurement is completely useless for measuring distances at this scale. Some would say that it's unsuitable for any purpose. At 200 microns, we can see a blood vessel stretching out ahead like a subway tunnel. We'll pass through its outer wall. Zoom in. At 5 microns, we see red and white blood cells, their outer walls porous enough to allow the transport of nutrients and waste into and out of the cell. We'll enter one of the cells that way too. Zoom in. 1 micron now. We can see the coiled strands of DNA that hold Kenneth's specific genetic code. Zoom in. 1,500 angstroms. Not only are the strands coiled, they are also twisted, packing their information as densely as possible. Zoom in. 80 angstroms. At this distance, we can begin to see individual molecules making up the strands of DNA. There are only 4 molecules that combine in varying sequences to encode the genetic diversity of every creature on Earth. Zoom in. 5 angstroms. Now we're close enough to see a single atom. Zoom in. 1 angstrom. The cloud of electron potentials is now visible. We pass through the buzzing swarm. Zoom in. 1/2 angstrom. It's empty and dark here. Peaceful. Just like it was in the depths of space. Zoom in. 1/1000th of an angstrom. Here the protons and neutrons that make up the atom's nucleus become visible. These particles, massive in comparison to electrons, seem unimaginably small at the end of our journey. Now let's rest for a bit. It's a strange, surreal world at this scale, where the normal laws of physics don't even apply. Down here, there's a whole new framework of rules and formulas called quantum mechanics, which is based on the way protons, neutrons, and electrons behave as both waves and particles at the same time. Quantum mechanics also encompasses the idea that energy like heat, light, and electromagnetic radiation is absorbed and emitted in discrete packets. Instead of increasing or decreasing in intensity like a smooth curve, it jumps up or down from one level to another, which is totally at odds with the way classical mechanics works. These available levels of energy are multiples of a number known as Planck's constant. There's so much to know about quantum mechanics, but let's not get into all that right now. Let's just look at one of the stranger side effects. So you may have heard that it is impossible to know how fast a particle is moving if you measure its position, and that you can't know the particle's position if you measure its speed. This is called Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. So without measuring these properties, we can only predict probabilities about the values that measurements might produce. Taking the measurement affects the system. But then measuring the particle causes the set of probabilities to reduce to a single value. That's called waveform collapse. You have made the particle choose its reality, in a manner of speaking. That leads to some strange thought experiments in itself, like Schrodinger's famous cat. Let's say we put a cat... No, wait. Let's use a hamster, because cats are awesome. Hamsters are just okay. We put a hamster into a lead-lined box, along with a glass vial of some sort of lethal gas. We also put a small amount of a radioactive substance into the box, and a sensor that detects radioactive emissions. If during the test period even a single atom of the substance decays, the lethal gas will be released, killing the hamster. Since we, outside the box, don't know whether or not the radioactive material decays, according to quantum mechanics, the hamster is both dead and alive. It isn't until we make the observation, by opening the box, that the hamster becomes one or the other, dead or alive. The observation itself affects the outcome. Well now, that leaves us in an interesting position. Here are a bunch of subatomic particles. Can we influence the larger world by observing them? How would we know which ones to observe in order to produce a desired effect? Well, suppose that we have all the time in the world, and no physical body. We can zoom in and out, zip around in space, hop back and forth in time. We can experiment to see what produces the best results. Everything is connected. One atom shifts course just slightly, bounces off another atom, and that one careens off yet another. It starts a chain reaction that grows and snowballs. A slight breeze shifts, causing a butterfly to flap its wings just a little harder. And you've heard the famous cliche about chaos theory, that the flapping of a butterfly's wings in Indiana can affect the course of a hurricane in China. Sure, typically people can't predict those kind of impacts directly. But given an infinite timeline and an omniscient perspective, well, it's worth trying, isn't it? Now we make an observation. The waveform collapses. Maybe there's no such thing as pure coincidence.